I'm willing to believe that, and that they're spying on us. I definitely believe that. But Google and Facebook are spying on us on a much greater scale, and they're foreign controlled too. They're run by people who hate the United States, demonstrably, they say so. So Google and Facebook are not a threat, but TikTok is. So if you're making that case, like, I know you're lying immediately.
Right. And the thing is that the bill is written such that if 20% of ownership is foreign, that's about what TikTok is, or if you're controlled by a foreign entity. But that's someone's opinion. They're just saying it's controlled by a foreign entity. I think it's probably controlled by profit. Like most things in the marketplace, they want to make a profit. They've spent about $1 billion trying to comply through this organization called CFIUS, which has to do with companies that have some foreign ownership trying to comply and have an American board, have the data kept over here. They've done nothing but try to comply, and the hysteria goes on and on and on. But the First Amendment's more important than anything they're talking about, and so is the Fifth Amendment. But there are many people, including some of your former colleagues at Fox, who believe that there's an exception to the Constitution, that it doesn't apply when there's national security. The problem with that is there's always a national security for any excuse for anything you want to do. And so I don't think you throw out the Constitution when there's allegations of some kind of connection. You have to prove that before you take someone's stuff and before you take someone's First Amendment privileges.
Well, and of course it's not. So we know it's not what they say it's about, obviously. And I know there's a furious lobbying campaign by various investors hoping to scoop up TikTok cheap and from competing companies that want to crush a competitor. I get all of that. And some people are really bought and paid for in Washington. I don't want to blow your mind, but that's true. But there's also an ideological battle here. And a lot of the people voting to ban TikTok object to the messages on TikTok. Like, that's true.
Yeah, it's content. Once you start objecting to content, what you're objecting to is speech. And I object to a lot of it. I don't use it. I've never been on TikTok. I read about what's on TikTok, but I don't use TikTok. But the thing is everybody wants the government to be the parent. They're like, oh, my teenagers, they've got phones and they're on all this stuff. I just can't deal with it. Will you help me by taking stuff off of there? But once you start doing that, there's a whole host of things that can be taken off of there. What about, people who say that you should have religious liberty or that we shouldn't teach transgenderism in the elementary schools? Those are, heretical views as well. Should those be taken down? So I think it's the opposite with TikTok. I think they're promoting a lot of left-wing things. But then there's also people on TikTok that my wife's always telling about, the liberals of TikTok, these people that are exposing the liberals on TikTok. And apparently they're pretty good investigative. I think it's a woman that does this, and she's pretty damn good at finding things out and exposing things. But the bottom line is the more information, the better. If you don't like it, don't use it. That's what happens in a free country. But it happens in an authoritarian country when you're connected to government. If you don't like something and you shut it down, and that's what's happening now. They don't like the content. They make an allegation that it's controlled by the Chinese government, which there isn't objective evidence of, and you probably have to go to court to prove something like that.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm disappointed by this hysteria because there are some people who have been relatively good in looking at government and the Constitution who actually on this go completely insane and just throw out all rules and say, oh, we got to do something about Chinese communism. And this isn't the way. Emulating Chinese communists is not the best way to combat Chinese communists.
Yeah, and they're almost exclusively neocons, which should tell you a lot. But last question. This action is supported by like the left, the real left, and by the neocons. It seems to me if this precedent stands, then the next target for shutdown by the government or forced sale by the government would be X, which is, of course, the platform they hate most because it's the freest of all the platforms in the world. And so what would stop the Congress or the next administration from saying, Elon Musk is effectively a tool of Russian disinformation, doing what they did to him, what they did to Trump to him, and forcing a sale of X? I mean, what would stop them?
The thing is I don't know enough about X to know who his other investors are. Probably some of them live in foreign countries. But think of the whole list of countries that have unsavory things. I'm not a big fan of Egypt's government. They don't have elections. They have indefinite detention. They prosecute political and religious opponents. So
Yes.
do most of the countries in the Middle East. But I'm not about. I wouldn't give Egypt any more military money, frankly. but I wouldn't ban your ability to trade with them. If you want to trade with Egypt, having embargoes is different than me not giving them free money. So I'm not for giving most countries, including China, any money. I don't want to give China research money. I don't want to share secrets with them. I don't want to share arms with them. There are all kinds of things I don't want to do with China, but I'm not ready to forbid people trading with them. And that's sort of where we're headed from this. But you can see the potential of, look, a lot of people have Saudi Arabian investors, but Saudi Arabia did some things that I don't find, they don't really have a free country. They killed a journalist. They chopped him up and threw him out of a plane. So these are things I object to, but I'm not sure I want to prevent anybody from having a Saudi Arabian investor like, Live Golf or something. We're going to say they can't exist because we don't approve of the Saudis. And so that's what we're headed towards, though. And there's every bit the argument that a regime like Saudi Arabia collects data on their enemies. You think any Shiite Muslims in Saudi Arabia are not followed by the police and don't have their data being collected? So all the things we accuse China of doing are being done in dozens and dozens of countries. Vietnam's a communist nation. Are we going to say that nobody does business with Vietnam? Most people argue that it's a little better since we do business with Vietnam, even though they still don't have the basic freedoms that we have. People would actually even argue that the trade with China overall, that the people are freer than they were under